Hello YouTube, this is my review of the Apple iPad 3rd generation. So this is the tablet itself. It features a gorgeous Retina display. It's a 9.7-inch IPS panel with a resolution of 2048 by 1536 pixels. All powered by a massive PowerVR SGX 543 MP4, I believe. That is a quad-core GPU built into the system on a chip that powers the iPad 3. And that is the A5X, which features a dual-core 1 GHz CPU and that PowerVR quad-core GPU, like I said. The iPad 3rd generation was first shipped with iOS 5.1, and you know, some years have passed since this thing was released, and now it is running iOS 8.1.1. As you can see right there on that gorgeous Retina display. Compared to its predecessor, the iPad 2, the iPad 3 offers a gigabyte of RAM and that faster GPU and a better screen. Other than that, there are not really any real major differences between the two. Of course, to power such a high-resolution display, and of course that better GPU, they had to fit a bigger battery. So the iPad 3 is actually a little bit thicker than the iPad 2 was, because of this massive 11,500 milliamp hour battery. So that's enough spec talk. Let's actually inspect the device a little bit closer. So I'm going to put it down here so you can take a good look at the aluminum housing that we've all become very familiar with. Pretty much until the first generation iPad mini, this was the way the iPad was designed. And after that they pretty much took the iPad mini's housing and then they just stretched it for the iPad Air and the iPad Air 2, etc. So here on the back of the iPad 3rd generation, we can see that the dock connector, or the 30 pin, is still here. Here is the rear-facing speaker. Slightly awkward that I put it here, but in the cover that I used, the sound actually bounces towards me, so that's pretty cool. Here, of course, is a Apple logo. I have the black version, so the Apple logo is black instead of silver. Here are the volume controls, volume up, volume down, and this is of course the mute button or screen rotation lock button. It just depends on how you set that up. This is the rear facing 5 megapixel iSight camera, and up there is the power button or the lock button, and all the way back here on the top as well is the 3.5mm audio jack. And of course on the front there is not really much to show, other than the fact that you have to fix the rotation. There you go. So on the front all we really have is your basic Apple things. We have the home button right here and a front-facing camera right there. This is a FaceTime 0.3 megapixel camera capable of VGA videos and photos. That's pretty much enough for 4x3 video calling. So, all in all, this is a pretty hefty tablet by today's standards. I mean, if you look at it, it's pretty darn thick. That's because of the battery, like I said earlier. But it does make this thing quite a bit heavier than today's tablets, that's for sure. This thing weighs about 650 grams, that's about 3 pounds, roughly. So, you know, oh well, 1.5 pounds I should say. That's what you get when you're European and you don't really actually know about all that stuff. But yeah, so that's the hardware and the hardware tour and hardware specs and all that good stuff. So how does that really compare to, you know, the iPad 2 speed-wise? Well, speed-wise they're pretty much the same. I mean, of course this thing has the advantage that it has a Retina display and, you know, the faster graphics. But other than that, it's pretty much the same thing. I mean, they both share the same CPU in their system on a chip, the A5X and the A5 Both feature the same 1 GHz dual-core A9 Cortex chip. So, you know, performance-wise, they're pretty much the same. It's just that this iPad 3 is assisted by its much beefier GPU. So in graphical tasks, this will be faster than the iPad 2. Compared to the iPad 4, yeah, the iPad 4 is quite a bit faster. It has new architecture, the A6X CPU, which is clocked higher, has an even better GPU, also has 1 gig of RAM, but it's overall just a bit faster of a tablet. And better suited for iOS 8, I think. So, you know, speaking about the OS, I'm reviewing this iPad 3 as it is running iOS 8. I'm not reviewing this running iOS 5, 6, or 7, but iOS 8. So how does it run on the iPad 3? Well, like I said, performance-wise, pretty much the same as the iPad 2. And the iPad 2 has some pretty massive performance issues and lag and all that stuff. And this one is no exception. For instance, this one has a very annoying bug with Google. When you go to the Google website, you know, it loads up pretty quickly. If you know, start typing, I only get the chance to type 1 character, and it will do an automatic search. Oh, what do you know? There's one time I'm trying it on camera, it doesn't do that. But yeah, it does have a couple of bugs. Here in portrait mode, for instance, this works just fine. But let me put it in a landscape. See if I can reproduce this bug that I found. Okay, doesn't do it that way. Oops. I'm very sorry, iPad. Oh wow, it's fixed. Wow, it fixed itself. But yeah, iOS 8 on the iPad 3 is pretty darn buggy. It's just things like that that I can't even reproduce, but they happen quite often, I can tell you that. For instance, if I have the tablet in portrait mode or in landscape mode and I try to swipe down for, you know, for spotlight or anything, the keyboard will show up on this side. It will go like the keyboard is in portrait mode while the screen is in landscape mode. And like I said, that Safari bug with Google that I have a couple of times. Actually, I have that quite often, that problem, but yeah. Performance-wise, it's acceptable, that's for sure. It's you know, coming from my iPad mini, I don't really notice much of a difference in speed-wise because, you know, once again, that shares the same CPU as well. But overall, it's a pretty good experience. I mean, should you buy this, you know, if you're used to something like an iPad 1 or an iPad 2, this is definitely not really the upgrade you're looking for, because the money you get back from your iPad 2 is pretty much only half of what a second-hand iPad 3 goes for. Because these things are priced sometimes pretty close to an iPad 4, and then there's of course a no-brainer to pick up an iPad 4. So if you have an older iPad, or if you're actually running a pretty recent, sort of high-end Android tablet, then this is definitely not the tablet that you're looking for. If you have some problems with your eyesight, or if you just, you know, you can't read screens very well, then this is definitely a tablet you should consider if you don't already own one. Definitely consider a tablet with a Retina display like this. And of course, because it's an iPad, it is very suitable for novice users. So, if you're all new to tablets and, you know, once again, your eyesight isn't all that perfect anymore, if you're a bit older maybe, this is definitely a tablet for you to consider. It's very simple to use, it's easy to use, the battery lasts a hell of a long time, it has a really awesome screen, you can't fuck up anything about it because it's iOS, and, you know, unless you start jailbreaking her and fiddling with it, there's not really any chance that you have to restore it really quickly. So yeah, that pretty much concludes my review on the iPad 3. It's a great tablet for everyday use. It's a great tablet if you're, you know, not a previous tablet user, or if you're coming from an iPad 1. Then it's definitely a good upgrade for you, or a good way to learn how to use a touchscreen or a tablet. So it's great for kids as well. It has ample RAM. It's a bit quicker in most tasks than the iPad 2 and the iPad mini first generation. But you do have to keep in mind that this thing, these are not sold anymore, and they haven't been for a couple of years now. So these go for hefty prices second hand, and you should consider picking up an iPad mini first generation new, because they usually go for about the same price as these go. The only downside being that the iPad mini first generation has an 8-inch screen, or 7.9, with an XGA resolution of 1024x768 instead of this Retina display. But on the other hand, that is a new device. Well, at least it's, it's new from the factory. And so that means you don't really need to know what its history was, or if it's been dropped a lot, if it's been repaired, or anything like that. You can just start up and immediately enjoy your tablet. But of course it's a smaller screen, low resolution, so in the end it's a little bit less sharp, and you have to deal with that. If money's not an issue and you're really looking for a good tablet, then of course you shouldn't be looking at an iPad 3 in the first place. Pick up an iPad 4, iPad Air, or iPad Air 2. Those are definitely the best bets. If you still own an iPad 3 and you're contemplating whether you should upgrade to iOS 8, well, don't. Stick to iOS 5, 6, or 7, whatever you have. Don't upgrade to 8 if you haven't already. It's definitely not an upgrade, it's pretty much a downgrade, and it will cripple your device to some degree. Until Apple has fixed that, stick to iOS 7, or iOS 6 preferably, which was the best iOS in my opinion. So that really concludes my review here. Hopefully you've all enjoyed this video. I thank you all for watching, and I wish you all have a nice day. Yeah, words.